it should not be the default, right? Like the default option should not be that I'm going to spend $250,000 and 4 years of my life to pursue a career. The default should be first, I'm going to see if there are opportunities out there that are just as lucrative, just as ambitious, and just as interesting that don't require any college debt.
The energy industry faces no shortage of challenges, but one of the most pressing and often overlooked is the growing shortage of skilled trade workers. While much attention is paid to engineers and advanced degree holders, the reality is that many critical energy jobs require skilled trade workers without college degrees. From technicians to electricians to line workers, these are the people who keep our energy system running. But how do we attract and train the next generation of skilled trade workers? And how do we make these jobs more accessible to those who may not even know they exist? These are the questions we're looking to answer in today's episode of Power Perspectives. And as a note to our regular listeners, I'm happy to note again that new in 2025, we have a video accompanying this podcast if you prefer to consume the conversation in that way. So, if you're used to just listening on your podcast app, I recommend you check the show notes for the link where you can now follow Power Perspectives on YouTube and watch these interviews. I'm Jason Price, your host, coming to you from New York City. Joining me as always is Matt Chester, Energy Central producer and community manager from Orlando, Florida. Matt, this idea of worker shortages in the skilled trades feels like something that's come up more and more in conversations at energycentral.com. What are you hearing from the community?
Yeah, Jason, you're definitely right that this is a topic that's gaining traction in our Energy Central community. We're hearing from utility leaders, the HR reps, and even the workers themselves. And it's not just that traditional story about, it's challenging to fill positions. Instead, the discourse is kind of evolving into being, towards that more tangible goal of shifting perception. There's a growing recognition that skilled trade jobs in energy, they offer great pay, job security, career advancement. But at the same time, many young people and career changers might be overlooking them. So what's exciting at this moment is that the range of solutions being explored, from apprenticeships, technical schools, high school outreach, and more, there's a lot of opportunities. And there's a push to make these jobs more accessible and provide dual opportunities to start filling in, that long discussed brain drain that as more seasoned employees in the utilities end up retiring, where we want to make sure the workforce stays as strong as it's needed during what's currently an unprecedented build out of the grid.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And before we dive in, a big thank you to West Monroe, our sponsor of today's episode. So to help us answer these skilled worker questions, we're joined today by Ruchir Shah, founder and CEO of SkillCat, a company that has empowered over 300,000 skilled trade workers with online simulation-based training and certification. Ruchir's work is helping to bridge the gap between energy jobs people needed to fill them. And we're excited to hear his insights today. So, Ruchir Shah, welcome to Energy Central's Power Perspectives podcast.
Thank you. No, I'm very excited to be here and chat energy jobs.
All right, good. Well, that's why you're here. We're thrilled to have you. So, Ruchir, let's start with the big picture. When we talk about the energy worker shortage, what do you think skilled trade roles are so often overlooked, and how critical are they to the energy industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so the entire built world, right? So actual physical assets that power our entire world, whether it's energy, construction, any sort of infrastructure or assets, the bread and butter of people building and maintaining all of that equipment is the skilled trades. And, you often hear about the energy worker shortage, and you get a lot of professors and people in universities talking about the shortage, and you're thinking it's all in the white collar jobs. But, if you look at it, there's a massive shortage of workers in the trades. And it's not just energy, right? So if you look at construction, infrastructure, there are millions of jobs that are going unfilled as baby boomers retire, and very few people, join the trades. And so there's a lot of different causes behind this problem, but it's definitely one of the biggest crises facing our world today, and especially the energy industry.
Yeah, for sure. The talent development challenge has been going on for quite some time, and you, as you've noted. So what exactly are these skilled trade roles and the typical profile of who currently fills these positions?
I mean, electricians, plumbers, installers, HVAC technicians, maintenance technicians who maintain equipment. There's operators at power plants and nuclear plants. There are install technicians for solar. It's almost every piece of equipment in general has three big components to working on it. There's install, there's maintenance, and then there's service and troubleshooting. And across that spectrum, there's a ton of jobs that go unfilled. Right now, most of these jobs are staffed by people who are just getting older, right? The average age in a lot of these industries is 50s, 60s, often even 70s, I've seen. And baby boomers are retiring as a massive group all over the country. And young people aren't joining the trades as much as they used to in the past. There's been a decline in shop class in a lot of schools across the country. There's a perceived, that a lot of these jobs are lower than jobs that you go to college for. And there's a perception that you don't make that much money in these jobs. And none of those things are accurate. And so there's a huge lack of awareness and understanding about how great these jobs are and how many there are out there. But yeah, it's primarily folks who are just a lot older. We're doing a great job, but are just retiring. And now we need to be able to, hand off the reins to the next generation.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, your organization. You work with skilled trade workers, you help them further train them. So what are the gaps in the training offerings that you see that are compelled you to take up this space? Help us understand more so just the origins of SkillCat and how you got here today.
It goes pretty far back. So my senior year of college, we talked about Amy Jaffe a little bit. She's a professor at NYU, and she was a professor of mine at Rice in college. And my senior year of college, I did research under her focused on the BP oil spill. And training was one of the biggest issues that caused that spill. And so built out a company right out of college, building online courses and simulations to prevent oil spills. So more effective training for folks working in the oil and gas industry. And that business did very well. And I went to business school at Stanford. And when I came out, I came back to the business and everyone was getting laid off, right? So it was COVID. And you had all these people going from making six-figure salaries in oil field jobs, going to working at grocery stores because they just didn't know what other industries could use their skill set. Mechanical skills, electrical skills, troubleshooting skills, but people aren't comfortable or aware of how to get into other industries with similar skills. And so that's kind of where the idea emerged of, hey, how do you build a really accessible, convenient way for folks to move into industries like energy, like construction, where there are massive shortages of workers and just no easy way for people to actually get into those jobs. And so that's where SkillCat was born, where we built out an online platform where you can build and get a bunch of certifications for important jobs in the physical world, important skilled trades jobs. And you learn a lot of hands-on skills through virtual simulations. And so it just makes it a lot more accessible for folks to get into industries that otherwise, often require going to very expensive schools and taking many years out of the workforce. And so that's kind of where we started. And it's been almost 4 years. We've trained hundreds of thousands of people. We work with some of the largest companies in the world. And we're just beginning to make a dent in this massive problem of getting more people into the trades.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, and that is about, it's a challenge that I feel like is just constant in many industries, and that is that people don't realize that these jobs are accessible without an advanced degree. To your point, taking 4 years off in the college education can just be something that's not a reality for many people. So what are some of the biggest barriers preventing people from pursuing these roles and roles that would make them qualified or even get qualified for them?
So I think there's two big issues here, right? One is awareness, and then the other is access. So from an awareness perspective, I don't think people realize that you can make a lot more without a college degree than you can make with a college degree. Right? You got a ton of college grads who come out and make 50, 60K a year with 250K in debt. And there's a huge group of skilled trade jobs that can come out straight from high school, zero debt, and start making money while you earn as an apprentice, making 50, 60, 70K a year. And it doesn't stop there. You have a lot of these people go on to start their own company. And I know a ton of business owners in HVAC, plumbing, electrical, who have $100 million businesses, have never taken on a cent of college debt. And then these jobs are also unbelievably satisfying. Where people have about 80, 90% job satisfaction in the trades versus 50% in your average desk job. So people don't realize any of this, right? So at first there's like a true awareness problem. Most people who get into the trades today get in because their family worked in the trades or their community or they know someone in the trades. If you don't have that, that entry point, you probably will never get into the trades or even realize how good these jobs are. So awareness is a huge, huge problem and then a huge gap. Then access, I think there's a couple different things, but honestly, a lot of companies have stopped training, right? So historically, apprenticeship programs were really critical, right? You join a union or you join your company's apprenticeship program and you start working, and then they train you and invest in your growth while actually you learn on the job. Increasingly, a lot of companies have cut those programs over time. And so training is a problem, right? A lot of trade schools, some trade schools are really great and prepare you well. A lot of them don't have much hands-on and just charge a lot of money and take a lot of time to not really position you for success in the industry. So I think there needs to be a better job at schooling to make it more accessible and easier for folks to get their foot in the door. And then employers need to do a better job of investing in training so that they can actually bring people from zero all the way up to being an independent technician.
The industry is going through a massive transformation. So I want to ask you and really get your thoughts around this. This transition to clean energy and this embrace for digital technologies, this utility of the future, if you will. How does that impact demand for skilled trade workers, and how are utilities preparing for this shift?
So on the clean energy side, honestly, I think a lot of the existing workforce is not super well prepared, right, for the move towards green energy. And I'll just use an example from a world that we're really involved in, which is HVAC. So we train a lot of heating, ventilation, air conditioning technicians. And increasingly, one of the most frequent requests a lot of these companies get is for heat pumps, right? And that you may or may not know, but from an energy perspective, one of the biggest energy consumers in your home, like over 50%, is air conditioning. And then heat pumps are often 50% or more efficient than traditional AC systems. So there's been a huge push federally all over the place to move into heat pumps, but they're pretty new as a system for a lot of existing tradespeople. A lot of people are not that familiar with those units. And so I think two things. One, if you really want to push the green energy revolution, you need to have HVAC installers and service techs who are skilled up and competent in how do you maintain and troubleshoot heat pumps. And then number two, if you truly want to bring a lot of new people into the industry, getting them very skilled up on heat pumps is a great way to get them in. Because it's kind of like AI. If you want to hire, if you want to solve a shortage of software developers, bring in some new young people who understand AI very well. There's a similar opportunity with heat pumps where you can train people on this new hot area that companies currently aren't very well equipped for. And so that's really interesting from the clean energy side. I would say similar on the tech side, right? Electrification is everywhere, right? So more and more things are getting electrified. Control systems are everywhere, where almost everything has an electric control system. We're slowly, a lot of traditional mechanical, hydraulically powered systems are disappearing and more electrical. And so there's some programming involved in a lot of those jobs. And, often the next generation is really well situated for a lot of those roles. So these things are definitely also contributing to some of the big shortages in the industry.
Ruchir, I want to follow up on it. I know that there, universities have either a nearby nuclear lab or even a small nuclear simulator. There was a university in Massachusetts that I lived near where they had a small nuclear plant to train engineers on nuclear, running a nuclear facility. Are you aware of such models where they have a geothermal on campus or a microgrid on campus or a community solar farm on campus or nearby that they're affiliated with that are trying to capture the college-age students on campus to, steer towards this? Or is it really left to the trade schools and left to the utilities with their own, programs to basically train the workforce?
No, it's really interesting. Honestly, we haven't done as much in some of those spaces yet. So I'm not as familiar. I do know that there's a lot of power in software, right? So a lot of this next generation has been trained on games, right? They spent, not even just trained, but they've grown up on games, right? Games and, so there's a portion of this role that has to be hands-on, right? Where you kind of need to understand, actually how you turn wrenches and things like that. But there's a lot of decision making in these roles. And so one of the things we do on our platform is we have virtual simulations where you're in a game-like scenario as a technician and have to go in and do an install task or a troubleshooting task, use a multimeter, and you do all of that digitally. We try to make it as immersive as possible, but it lets you get reps, right? So a lot of these jobs, you don't get good for many years because you need to get a lot of reps, seeing a lot of different scenarios, and you can really speed up that timeline through simulation. And they don't have to be, to your point, these large physical installations. You can do a lot of this stuff effectively digitally as well. But yeah, typically what we've seen is it's either software companies like us that come in and have solutions like this, or schools, more enterprising, more thoughtful companies build some of these systems themselves. And so it really depends. I think the companies that do the best, that we've seen grow the fastest and are investing in their people the most, they go that next mile and do whatever it takes. So they have a lot of different equipment around, and they let you actually get hands-on experience on directly related to what you're going to be working on.
So our listening audience is largely made up of utility executives and decision makers. So what message do you have for these stakeholders in utility business about the trade worker shortage, and how you see this impacting utilities moving forward?
Yeah, I think, at least most of the executives I've talked to, it's one of their biggest problems and biggest challenges is the trades worker shortage. And if it isn't affecting your business today, it will very soon, right? Because it's only getting worse from a day to day. So I would say do something about it, right? So I think we've worked with, I think I almost say there's like two different types of companies we end up across in the industry. Half the companies, everyone's complaining about the skilled trade worker shortage. Half of them are continuing to try the same tactics, which is primarily look for experienced people who already have, 5+ years of experience and hire them. It often doesn't work. They're really hard to find, increasingly difficult. You got to pay recruiters, tens of thousands of dollars. But a lot of them just haven't changed that old legacy, old school mindset. So the other half of companies that we've seen, they really tackle this problem head on. And so they try to hire and build out a pipeline to hire entry level. They build out detailed, thorough apprenticeship programs that either hire a team of instructors, involve VR or app-based training or education, and then build out a complete structure step by step to bring someone in from day one to make them more of an experienced tech.
I want to ask you about this tension in the workforce development space. I think people have this perception of prestige of different types of jobs, the type of education, the training required, and who ultimately fills them. So what are some of those misconceptions we need to break down in the utility sector? Specifically, what is your advice to students, high school students, college students today who are identifying the types of careers that they may want to get into?
I ran a half marathon with this on the back on my shirt. Rescue 100,000 kids from college. And that's one of the big goals, is how do we rescue people from college, right? I think there are some people who should go to college, right? There's sometimes it makes sense, but it should not be the default, right? Like the default option should not be that I'm going to spend $250,000 and 4 years of my life to pursue a career. The default should be, first, I'm going to see if there are opportunities out there that are just as lucrative, just as ambitious, and just as interesting, that don't require any college debt. So I would say you really should do a deep dive and study all of the different careers that are out there. And the trades are a really, really great opportunity, right? I'll say it again, but they make so much money. They're, for the most part, AI proof, especially compared to marketing jobs and so many jobs. And computer science guys are struggling like crazy to find jobs right now. It's a tough world out there, right? Skilled trade jobs make a ton of money. They're relatively AI proof. People are very happy. And you have a guaranteed stable income that's really high. But if you want to, you could also make hundreds of millions of dollars by starting your own company. So it has the same range and same set of possibilities as any job you would go to college for. And so you should absolutely be considering skilled trade jobs if you're in high school. And, if you don't, you're going to be entering, a crowded white collar, job market, which is looking like it's going to be a pretty tough market for many years to come.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel that there was an author who wrote that to really pull off this green revolution in the energy field, you're going to need about 250,000 more members, skilled trade workers in the workforce now than in the past. So there's not only a shortage, but there's this huge gap in where we need to be and where we need to go to get to, hitting some of our targets. I guess that another attribute, and I would love to hear, when you speak to students or recruits for your program, how much is the, improving the environment, addressing climate risk play into it? Or is it just, career proofing and making money?
Yeah, I haven't. So I think in theory, right, everybody should be talking about this a lot more. Like the green energy movement, right? People who are climate conscious should be talking about, hey, if you want to help the climate, go into the skilled trades and go get into a job where you can actually directly help this, like at the front lines. Honestly, I don't think most people who care about climate have any idea that this would be considered a green job and that these jobs are actually needed. Like, I mean, clearly you do, but I think a lot of a lot of the young generation doesn't even make that connection because no one even talks about it. Right? It's so rare to hear that, hey, I want to help the environment, so I want to become an electrician. Like it's something I've just had never heard until I immersed myself in this world. So I'm trying to help change that dynamic and change that mindset where, hey, these are actually as green as the rest of the jobs out there. Part of the issue is traditionally a lot of the people who go into the trades, you already know people in the trades, right? That's typically what makes you go into the trades. Unfortunately, right? Guidance counselors do not push skilled trade jobs. The whole guidance counselor program was started to push people to college. So they just don't push the trades. And I think often, you see the skilled trades, a lot of skilled trades people are, sometimes traditional skilled trades people can be painted as anti, the green movement, right? It's like, liberal, conservative, like right, left. But I do think that for folks who are liberal and who care about green energy in a lot of those areas, there's no better job in the trades. And so it's not a partisan issue, right? These are like, no matter your reason, these are very, very mission driven jobs that really help the environment.
What can utilities learn from other industries? What industries are doing well and filling the shortage of skilled trade? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if anyone's doing well. I think some of the more residential facing industries, so like residential HVAC, like residential plumbing, like residential electrical, they're a little bit easier they do a better job of marketing to individuals, right? And young people, right? So you see a lot of electricians on TikTok and they like talk through their day. There's a big Wall Street Journal article about all of these blue collar influencers on TikTok. I think some of these more legacy industries like the utility space, they're so removed. Like the job of a utility technician is pretty removed from an end user residential customer often. So they don't do as good of a job of promoting themselves in this same way. And so I think, but they should, right? These jobs some of them are really neat, really interesting, fascinating jobs. And so like going on TikTok, like building social media funnels from a lot of these channels, I think there's a lot of things that can be learned. Honestly, I don't think anyone in the trade does it very well. So I think like the best examples can come from like the STEM movement, and like a lot of traditional white collar jobs do a good job of doing this, but nuclear. I have yet to see a great TikTok about being a nuclear plant operator, but I'm sure it's a pretty epic job, right? But I've never even no one could even. It's probably tough for people, especially young people, to visualize what that would look like and why it could be fun and exciting and sexy.
I think you phrase it perfectly there. I really appreciate the insight. And I think the word like sexy, just trying to capture the people's imagination. Like, what would it be like to work at a nuclear power plant? I've thought of that many times in my career. It's like, what's it like?
People get frustrated that like all Gen Z wants to be influencers. But I mean, if you look at it, that's what they see, right? And they see that it's like this like cool, exciting life. It's not, I mean, I've had friends in the past who are influencers. It kind of sucks as a job in a lot of ways, right? There's not that much meaning, or there's like a lot of challenges with it, but they're seeing it, right? So I think if you can get more nuclear plant operators and solar solar technicians. We got more people out there pushing these jobs, sharing their days, sharing their lives. That's what's needed for that next generation.
All right. Well, okay. So you and your team are obviously trying to, fill the training gap. But can you talk to us about what other trends or innovations you see on the horizon that could help, solve the skilled worker shortage, particularly as the energy industry evolves toward clean and digital technologies? What are some trends that you would like to see or starting to see that may start, turning the tide with some of this that we've been talking about today?
There's been a bunch. I mean, there's a lot of articles, a lot of writing lately that Gen Z is very excited about the skilled trades. So, however it's happened, I think maybe because AI has made it really difficult for a lot of people to get traditional jobs out of college. Maybe it's because people want to get away from technology. There's like a big backlash to technology. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of there seems to be a lot of promise in that.
Yeah, I get it. I feel like there's every generation there's some returning to earth, if you will, or returning to your roots sort of mentality. I feel like we saw that in the farming, the urban farming. We saw more philanthropic and fulfillment after the Great Recession. So perhaps this is what you're alluding to, is that there's another sort of generational movement that's taking place. I'm not sure if it's grasped it completely, but there's an element of that working into the thinking here. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's some hope. I think there's also some hope in the fact that it's going to become increasingly difficult for people to ignore this problem. Like, you see it, like in the HVAC, if you own a home, it's increasingly, like, unbelievably expensive to get anything fixed at your home, right? Because of the skilled trade worker shortage. So you're going to start seeing this seep into every part of our lives, that it gets more and more expensive if we don't invest in our skilled trade workforce. So I don't know if technology, like, I don't think AI is magically going to solve this problem. I think it requires a fundamental societal shift in how we think about skilled trade work and how we market these jobs to the next generation. But I think a lot more people are talking about it, and so I'm hopeful for the future.
Well, Ruchir, we really appreciate you diving into this critical and often overlooked topic, but the necessity of, filling the skilled trade gap that exists in our country. We're gonna give you the final word, but first we're gonna switch over to what we call the lightning round, which gives us an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, the person, rather than you, the professional. So I'm gonna throw a series of questions at you, and we ask you to keep your response to one word or phrase. So, first question is: what book, movie, or other piece of media would you take with you to a deserted island?
The deserted island means you got to read it a lot. So probably Harry Potter. Probably like, maybe the fourth book.
What is the best gift you've ever received?
I'm a huge fan of the TV show The Office. And so my wife got me this cake for my birthday a few years ago that was fully Office themed, and I loved it.
What was the first job you remember dreaming of having as a child?
I wanted to be president of the United States. I don't think I necessarily want that job anymore, but we'll see.
We're collecting lightning round questions from past podcast guests to ask future guests. So this question is from Veronica Unkono of the National Wildlife Fund. What is the one accomplishment that you have achieved that you would be excited to share with your younger self?
I got a 6-pack before my wedding, and it's been like a lifelong dream, and then never been close, but I got one before my wedding a few years ago. So proudest accomplishment, hands down.
All right, now it's your turn. What lightning round question do you want to challenge a future guest? And it can be topical and related to energy, or simply something off the wall. It's your call.
If today was your last day on Earth, what would you do?
And then our final question, the question we ask everyone: what are you most motivated by?
I think building a really powerful community. And so I think for me, why I've loved SkillCat is we have a team of people, both in the company and outside of it, who really love what we're doing, and we're bringing everybody forward. And so I think being around good people who are united by a common mission and a common goal, working together. So I guess community.
All right, so I told you to give you the final word. So knowing that you've got utility decision makers listening in today, what advice or concrete action should they take away from today's conversation?
Yeah, I would say don't wait. All right. So if you're seeing issues or challenges in your workforce around training and development, speak out. Find partners like us, like SkillCat, and find a way to build out a platform to help engage and grow the next generation of skilled tradespeople in the industry. Right? It's really the most critical problem, and we can't ignore it anymore.
Those are great closing thoughts, and we want to thank you for your time today. And the work you're doing at SkillCat is not only vital to the energy sector, but certainly to the broader economy. And it's inspiring to hear how you're helping bridge that gap with the skilled trade workforce. So thank you for taking time to join us today. And I'm sure our listeners will have questions and comments and follow up on the important conversation that we discussed, and they'll do so on the Energy Central platform. So we welcome you to keep the conversation going. So until then, though, Ruchir Shah, thank you for joining today's podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And you can always reach Ruchir through the Energy Central platform, where he welcomes your questions and comments. And we want to give a shout out of thanks to the podcast sponsors that made today's episode possible. To West Monroe. West Monroe is a leading partner for the nation's largest electric, gas, and water utilities, working together to drive grid modernization, clean energy, and workforce transformation. West Monroe's comprehensive services are designed to support utilities in advancing their digital transformation, building resilient operations, securing federal funding, and providing regulatory advisory support. With a multidisciplinary team of experts, West Monroe offers a holistic approach that addresses the challenges of the grid today and provides innovative solutions for a sustainable future. Once again, I'm your host, Jason Price. Plug in and stay fully charged in the discussion by hopping into the community at energycentral.com, and we'll see you next time at the Energy Central Power Perspectives Podcast.